The Donald Trump administration seems to have made a secret deal with China. Today it became known that the United States lifted sanctions against the Chinese Ministry of State Security because of a large-scale cyber espionage campaign called Salt Typhoon. Moreover, according to Trump's team, the sanctions may be further eased to avoid worsening United States-China relations or disrupting the October trade deal between President Donald Trump and Xi Jinping. Remember, this agreement is temporary and only lasts a year, but there's more. After almost a year of Trump's presidency, it turned out that the United States of America still hasn't published the two most important documents for any United States president: the National Security Strategy and the National Defense Strategy. The publication of the documents defining the global security strategy of President Trump's administration was delayed due to changes insisted upon by United States Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Regarding China as political rights, Trump's team decided not to raise the issue of these documents publicly so as not to mention, for example, Taiwan and the threat from China in the Indo-Pacific region. After all, Xi Jinping might take offense and everyone would see how disastrous Donald Trump's trade war turned out to be. My name is Alexei Pichi, let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, give it a like, leave any comment under this episode, and subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pichi News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation or paid subscription using the links and details in the description of this video. I would appreciate any support from you. So, something strange is happening with Donald Trump's team when it comes to China, the country Trump so actively threatened to fight against. Today, it became known that the United States has temporarily postponed imposing sanctions against the Chinese Ministry of State Security because of a large-scale cyber espionage campaign called Salt Typhoon. The decision aimed to avoid straining United States-China relations and protect the trade deal reached by Trump and Xi Jinping in October. And also, so as not to jeopardize Donald Trump's visit to Beijing. In April, several American officials and sources familiar with the matter told the Financial Times that the United States administration also decided not to impose new strict export restrictions on China after the summits in Busan. According to them, the priority of the Trump administration's policy towards China has shifted to ensuring stability until the United States reduces its dependence on China for the production of rare earth metals. In addition, Trump does not want to risk his planned visit to Beijing in April. And here I just want to remind you that earlier it became known that the hacker group Salt Typhoon, backed by the Chinese Ministry of State Security, or Ministry of State Security as it's called, had successfully hacked the unencrypted communications of high-ranking American officials the day before. It became known that this spy group can completely eavesdrop on all American officials, intercept their correspondence, and so on. But Trump decided to forgive all this to China, since he values trade relations and agreements, to be precise, above national security. The issue of national security will come up more than once in this episode. And you remember how Joe Biden's administration also restricted the supply of microchips to China, stating that it was a matter of national security? So now, Donald Trump's administration is planning to hold a high-level meeting soon to decide whether to grant NVIDIA a license to export the advanced H200 chip to China. And Trump himself hinted that he is ready to allow NVIDIA to sell the more powerful Blackwell chip to Beijing. Trump's advisors warn against this, calling it very dangerous. We're giving advanced tech to the Chinese and they'll use it for weapons. What are you thinking? Trump says his April trip to Beijing is very important, so he may make some concessions. Plus, he says, listen, we're going to make good money on this, so let's make money. Moreover, in the United States, it was suddenly announced the day before that the Chinese company Alibaba had allegedly supported China's military operations against the United States. Then in the United States, they said, listen, we need to impose sanctions against this company, Alibaba. But Scott Bessent, the Minister of Finance, intervened and instructed White House staffer Stephen Miller to make sure that United States departments did not take actions that could threaten efforts to ease tensions with China. And Alibaba, everyone forgot about it, and that's not all. Every United States president always develops important documents for our project, and the characteristics are American. but the publication of documents defining the global security strategy of the administration of President Donald Trump has been postponed due to changes insisted upon by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent regarding China. So initially it was expected that the National Security Strategy and the National Defense Strategy would be published in the spring, then the publication was postponed to the summer, and then it was announced that this would happen in early autumn. But it still hasn't happened. As Politico writes, the documents went through several rounds of revision after Scott Bessent asked to refine the wording regarding China. Given the sensitive trade talks with Beijing and the Western Hemisphere's higher priority than in past administrations. The National Security Strategy has been used by United States administrations to define their overall strategic priorities, from the economy to relations with allies and adversaries and to military posture. The draft undergoes multiple readings and is evaluated by government members. To reflect the breadth of vision and to ensure that the entire administration, that is, the whole presidential team, all the ministries, move in the same direction on this most important course. The National Security Strategy has been used by administrations to define relationships with allies and adversaries and to conduct trade negotiations with Beijing on tariffs and other issues. But the Pentagon has maintained its position that China remains the main military competitor of the United States and there is still no new strategy. But it is precisely this last point, that the Pentagon treats China this way, that has begun to seriously worry Beijing. That's why sources now claim that the United States Secretary of the Treasury has called for softening some of the wording. Any changes in one document will require similar changes in the other, since they must be synchronized to express a unified position and focus. The Secretary of the Treasury is asking the Pentagon to soften some assessments regarding the military plan toward China. United States Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth is expected to deliver a speech this Friday, December 5, about the Pentagon's efforts to accelerate weapons production specifically to counter the Chinese threat. At the same time, Pete Hegseth is currently working with his Chinese counterpart Admiral Dun Dun to establish communication between the United States and Chinese militaries, to prevent disagreements or misunderstandings from escalating into an unpredictable conflict in the Indo-Pacific region. These steps by the administration, as Politico writes, are a response to China's large-scale military buildup in the Indo-Pacific region and the resulting tensions. In relations with the Philippines, Beijing and Manila are confronting each other over claims in the South China Sea. And in recent years, the United States has been supplying the Philippines with more modern weaponry, partly to deter the Chinese threat. China also constantly sends fighter jets and warships to the shores of Taiwan. And it's important to note here that the United States National Security Strategy, which is developed by every presidential administration in the United States, has not been updated since 2022 during the administration of Joe Biden. And the document highlights three main topics: strategic competition with China and Russia, restoring investments, and focusing on domestic industrial policy. The recognition that climate change is a central challenge affecting all aspects of national security is also part of Joe Biden's strategy, and Americans are still living by it. The new national security strategy is expected to pay more attention to the Western Hemisphere than the previous one. Those strategies that focused on the Middle East, on fighting terrorism, on China and Russia. The new strategy will include these topics, but will also focus on issues such as migration, drug cartels, and relations with Latin America, all of this under one umbrella. And now, analysts suggest that Trump may deliberately leave China out of the line of fire in the new national security and defense strategy in order to preserve the trade deal they made in October. So it turns out that now Trump has decided to sacrifice national security and defense issues just to avoid unnecessary conflict with China. I'd like to remind you that Trump started this trade war and now they're trying to fix it with these tools. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.